The woman who stumbled into Redemption, Texas in the scorching summer of 1876 looked like she had been chewed up by the desert and spit back out. Her dress torn at the hem, her face sun-blistered, and her eyes holding a determination that burned brighter than the midday sun beating down on the dusty main street. She carried nothing but a small cloth satchel that appeared to contain little more than air, and when she collapsed on the wooden steps of the general store, the entire town seemed to hold its breath, watching this stranger who had materialized from nowhere like a mirage made flesh. Cole Brennan was the first to reach her, his boots kicking up clouds of dust as he rushed from where he had been tending his horse outside the saloon. He knelt beside her, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit upright, and when her eyes fluttered open, they were the color of storm clouds over the plains, gray and turbulent and alive with a fire that startled him. She was beautiful in a raw, unpolished way, with dark hair matted with dust, and cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. And when she spoke, her voice was hoarse from thirst but steady with purpose. "I need water," she said, not as a plea but as a statement of fact, and Cole found himself nodding, reaching for his canteen without hesitation. She drank deeply, water spilling down her chin and neck, soaking into the collar of her ruined dress, and when she finally lowered the canteen, she looked at him with such intensity that he felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in all his 28 years of living. "Thank you," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I have come to make something of myself." Cole helped her to her feet, aware of the townspeople gathering around them, their faces filled with curiosity and suspicion in equal measure. Redemption was a small town, barely 300 souls, carved out of the harsh Texas landscape by people who were either running from something or running toward a dream they could not find anywhere else. Strangers were not uncommon, but women traveling alone were rare enough to cause talk, and a woman traveling alone with nothing to her name was practically unheard of. "Cole Brennan," he said, introducing himself. "I work the Double R Ranch just outside of town. Where did you come from?" Eleanor straightened her spine, and despite her disheveled appearance, there was dignity in the gesture. "I walked from Fort Worth. My husband died 3 months ago, and his family took everything, said a woman had no right to property that belonged to their bloodline. They left me with nothing, not even the clothes I had bought with my own wages from taking in laundry. So I took what I could carry and left." The crowd murmured, some with sympathy, others with the kind of judgment that came easy to people who had never faced such hardship. Cole felt anger rise in his throat, not at Eleanor but at the injustice she had described, the casual cruelty that could strip a person of everything and leave them to die in the desert heat. "You walked all the way from Fort Worth?" asked Mrs. Patterson, the owner of the general store, stepping forward with her hands on her ample hips. "That is near 70 miles. "I know exactly how far it is," Eleanor said, meeting the older woman's gaze without flinching. "I walked it in 6 days, sleeping under whatever shelter I could find, drinking from streams when I could find them. I am here now, and I intend to stay. I intend to build something for myself, something no one can take away." Cole admired her conviction, the steel in her voice that spoke of a will that could not be broken. He glanced around at the faces of his neighbors, seeing the doubt written there, the belief that this woman would be gone within a week, either dead from exposure or crawled back to wherever she had come from. But Cole saw something different. He saw a fighter, a survivor, someone who had been knocked down and had chosen to stand back up swinging. "You will need a place to stay," he heard himself saying, and Eleanor turned those storm-gray eyes on him again. "There is a boarding house run by Mrs. Caldwell on the east side of town. I can take you there. Make sure she gives you a fair rate." "I have no money for a boarding house," Eleanor said bluntly. "I have nothing. But I can work, I can sew, I can cook, I can clean, I can keep books. I can do whatever needs doing, and I will earn my keep." Mrs. Patterson studied Eleanor for a long moment, and Cole could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, weighing profit against propriety, opportunity against reputation. Finally, she nodded. I could use help in the store. My arthritis has been acting up something fierce, and my daughter moved to Dallas last year. You can work for room and board until you get on your feet. There is a small room in the back where we used to store extra inventory. It is not much, but it has a bed and a window. Eleanor's shoulders sagged slightly with relief, but she quickly straightened again, as if unwilling to show weakness. I will work harder than anyone you have ever employed. You will not regret this. See that I do not, Mrs. Patterson said, but there was a hint of warmth in her tone. Come inside and get cleaned up. You look like you have been dragged behind a wagon. As Eleanor followed Mrs. Patterson into the store, she glanced back at Cole, and something passed between them in that look. Something unspoken but powerful. A recognition that they were both people who understood what it meant to fight for survival in a world that gave no quarter. Cole touched the brim of his hat in farewell, and Eleanor smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed her face from merely pretty to something that took his breath away. Over the following weeks, Cole found excuses to visit the general store more often than was strictly necessary. He would claim he needed rope when he had 3 coils hanging in his barn, or ammunition when he had boxes of it stored in his bunkhouse, or tobacco when he did not even smoke. Mrs. Patterson saw through his transparent excuses, but said nothing, just smiled knowingly and called for Eleanor to help him find whatever fictional item he was pretending to need. Eleanor settled into redemption like a seed finding fertile soil. She worked from dawn until long after dark, organizing the store's inventory with such efficiency that Mrs. Patterson wondered how she had ever managed without her. She repaired torn sacks, mended damaged goods to make them saleable again, and kept the books with a neat, precise hand that revealed an education beyond what most people would expect from a woman who had walked 70 miles through the desert. But more than that, Eleanor began to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. She noticed that the store carried no ready-made clothing, forcing people to either sew their own or order from catalogs that took months to arrive. She noticed that women in the area were starved for small luxuries, things like ribbons and lace and fragrances that reminded them of civilization. She noticed that ranchers and cowboys often needed repairs done to their tack and gear, but had no one in town who specialized in leather work. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Cole found Eleanor sitting on the steps of the general store, working by lamplight to repair a saddle that belonged to one of the ranch hands from the R. Her fingers moved with practiced skill, threading thick needles through worn leather, and Cole stood watching for a moment before clearing his throat to announce his presence. "You do leather work too?" he asked, climbing the steps to sit beside her. Eleanor did not look up from her stitching. "My father was a saddle maker in Tennessee before the war. He taught me the trade before he died at Shiloh. I was 10 years old when he left, and 12 when we got word he was never coming back. My mother remarried a man who thought women should only know how to cook and clean, so I had to practice in secret late at night when everyone else was sleeping. It is funny how the things we hide often become the things that save us." Cole heard the weight of history in her words, the layers of loss and resilience that had shaped her into the woman sitting beside him. "I am sorry about your father." "So am I," Eleanor said, finally looking up at him. "But sorry does not change anything. Action does. Building something does. My father used to say that the only legacy worth leaving is the one you create with your own hands, not the one you inherit from someone else's labor." "That is a good philosophy," Cole said, and he meant it. He had his own history of loss, his own reasons for understanding the need to create something lasting. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. They left me the R, but it was barely surviving, more debt than assets. I spent the last 12 years building it into something profitable, something stable. There were times I wanted to give up, sell it off, and head west to try my luck in California or up north in Montana. But I stayed, and I fought, and now I have something that is mine." Eleanor's expression softened, and she set down the saddle, giving him her full attention. "Then you understand. You understand what it means to start with almost nothing and refuse to let circumstances defeat you." "I do," Cole said, holding her gaze. and I understand what it takes to keep fighting even when the world tells you to quit. That is why I admire what you are doing. Most people who went through what you went through would have given up, would have let bitterness poison them. But you are building something instead. I have no choice, Eleanor said, but there was no self-pity in her voice, only pragmatism. The world does not care about my bitterness or my pain. It only cares about what I can contribute, what I can create. So I will create. I will build. I will make something that no one can take from me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The sounds of the town settling into evening around them, horses nickering in their stables, dogs barking in distant yards, the tinny piano from the saloon playing a melody that drifted on the warm breeze. Cole felt something growing between them, something that went beyond attraction, though there was certainly that as well. It was recognition, kinship, the sense of having found someone who understood the language of survival and ambition that so few others spoke. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said eventually. "You can ask," Eleanor replied, picking up the saddle again. "Whether I answer depends on the question." "Why redemption? You could have stopped in any town between Fort Worth and here. What made you choose this place?" Eleanor's hands stilled on the leather, and for a moment Cole thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "Because I like the name. Redemption. It felt like a promise, like a place where someone could be forgiven for their past and allowed to start over. I know it is probably just a name, that the town was likely named for some other reason entirely, but it spoke to me. And when you have nothing, sometimes you have to follow the things that speak to you, even if they are just words on a sign." Cole felt his heart constrict with an emotion he could not quite name. "For what it is worth, I am glad you chose here. Redemption is better for having you in it." Eleanor looked at him then, really looked at him, her gray eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was sincere or simply being kind. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she smiled, that transformative smile that made Cole feel like he was standing in sunlight. "Thank you, Cole. That means more than you might realize." As summer deepened into fall, Eleanor's presence in Redemption became not just accepted, but essential. She convinced Mrs. Patterson to let her use a corner of the store to set up a small dressmaking operation, and within weeks she was taking orders from women all over the county. Her dresses were simple but well-made, priced fairly, and most importantly, they fit properly because Eleanor took the time to measure and adjust for each customer's individual shape. But Eleanor did not stop there. She noticed that the town had no cafe, that travelers and cowboys had nowhere to get a decent meal except the saloon, which served food as an afterthought and charged twice what it was worth. She approached Mrs. Patterson with a proposal. Expand the general store to include a small dining area where Eleanor would serve breakfast and lunch. She would do all the cooking and cleaning, and they would split the profit 60-40, with the larger share going to Mrs. Patterson as the owner of the property. Mrs. Patterson was skeptical at first, worried about the investment and the risk, but Eleanor had prepared her argument carefully. She showed Mrs. Patterson her calculations demonstrating how much money was currently leaving Redemption as people traveled to neighboring towns for meals, how many cowboys and ranch hands would pay good money for home-cooked food, how the dining area would bring more people into the store and increase sales across the board. "You have a head for business?" Mrs. Patterson said, studying the neat columns of figures Eleanor had prepared. "Where did you learn to think like this?" "From necessity," Eleanor replied, "and from watching my first husband. He was a clerk at a law firm, and he used to bring his work home. I would watch him organize cases and prepare arguments, and I realized that everything in life is an argument, a negotiation. You have to present your case clearly, show the benefits, and address the objections before they are even raised. That is all business is, really, convincing people that what you offer is worth more than what they have to give up to get it." Mrs. Patterson laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "You are going to go far, Eleanor Hayes. All right, we will do it. But I want to see this cafe open within 6 weeks, and if it is not profitable within 3 months, we shut it down. Agreed?" Agreed, Eleanor said, shaking the older woman's hand. Cole watched Eleanor work with an awe that bordered on worship. She hired 2 local men to build out the dining area, negotiating their rates down by offering to include meals as part of their payment. She sourced tables and chairs from families who were upgrading their own furniture, refinishing the pieces herself until they looked nearly new. She developed a menu that was limited but delicious, focusing on things she could prepare quickly and efficiently: eggs and bacon and biscuits for breakfast, stews and sandwiches and pies for lunch. The cafe opened on a crisp October morning, and by noon there was a line of hungry customers stretching out the door. Eleanor moved through the small space like a dancer, taking orders, cooking, serving, clearing tables, all with a smile and a kind word for everyone. Cole sat at a corner table, ostensibly eating lunch, but mostly just watching her, marveling at her energy and competence. When the lunch rush finally died down, Eleanor collapsed into the chair across from him, wiping her forehead with her apron. "I think that went well," she said, and then she laughed, a sound of pure joy that made Cole's chest feel tight. "You did more than well," he said. "You did something amazing. Eleanor, you opened a successful business in 6 weeks, starting from absolutely nothing. Do you realize how extraordinary that is?" Eleanor's cheeks flushed with pleasure at the praise, but she shook her head. "It is not extraordinary. It is just work. Hard work, yes, but nothing special." "It is special," Cole insisted, leaning forward. "Eleanor, most people could not do what you have done. Most people would have given up a dozen times over, but you kept going. You saw what needed doing, and you did it. You walked in with nothing and built something. That is the finest thing I have seen." The words hung in the air between them, and Cole realized belatedly that he had revealed more than he intended, had let his admiration and his growing feelings bleed into his voice. Eleanor stared at him, her gray eyes wide and shining with unshed tears, and for a long moment neither of them moved. "Cole," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "why do you keep coming here? Why do you watch me the way you do? Why do you say things like that, things that make me feel like maybe I am not just surviving but actually living?" Cole reached across the table and took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm, the roughness that spoke of hard work and harder choices. "Because I have been watching you for months now, watching you build yourself up from nothing, and I have fallen in love with you. I love your strength and your determination. I love the way you never complain, never ask for pity. I love the way you see opportunities where others see only problems. I love the way you smile when you think no one is looking. I love you, Eleanor, and I know it is probably too soon, and I know you have been through hell, and I do not expect you to feel the same way, but I could not let another day pass without telling you the truth." Eleanor's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "You foolish man," she said, but there was no anger in her words, only tenderness. "Do you think I have not noticed? Do you think I have not felt the same thing growing inside me every time you walk through that door? I have been fighting it, telling myself I am not ready, that I need to focus on building my business and my life. But the truth is, you are part of that life, Cole. You have been from the moment you gave me water on the steps of this store. You saw me at my lowest and you did not look away. You did not judge. You just helped. And then you kept helping, kept showing up, kept believing in me even when I was not sure I believed in myself. How could I not love you?" Cole felt like his heart might burst from his chest. He stood, pulling Eleanor to her feet, and wrapped her in his arms, feeling her melt against him, her head tucked perfectly under his chin. She smelled like cinnamon and coffee and hard work, and Cole thought he had never smelled anything more perfect in his entire life. "I want to court you properly," he murmured into her hair. "I want to take you on picnics and buggy rides. I want to introduce you to everyone at the ranch as my sweetheart. I want to marry you, Eleanor, if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, a partnership where we both work towards something bigger than either of us could create alone." Eleanor pulled back slightly to look up at him, her eyes still wet but glowing with happiness. "Yes," she said simply. Yes to all of it. But Cole, I need you to understand something. I will not give up what I'm building here. I will not become just a wife, tucked away on your ranch, my identity subsumed into yours. I need to keep working, keep creating, keep being Eleanor Hayes, who built something from nothing. I would never ask you to give that up, Cole said fiercely. Your independence, your ambition, your drive, those are not flaws to be corrected. They are gifts to be celebrated. I do not want to own you. Eleanor, I want to stand beside you and watch you conquer the world. Eleanor kissed him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his, and Cole felt the entire world narrow down to that single point of contact, that moment of connection that felt like coming home after a long journey. They stood there in the empty cafe, holding each other, and neither of them noticed Mrs. Patterson watching from the doorway of the general store, a satisfied smile on her weathered face. The courtship that followed was conducted in the stolen moments between Eleanor's work at the cafe and Cole's responsibilities at the Double R Ranch. He would ride into town in the early mornings to have breakfast at her counter, and they would talk while she cooked, discussing everything from politics to poetry, from the challenges of running a business to their dreams for the future. On Sundays, when the cafe was closed, Cole would take Eleanor out in his buggy, driving to scenic spots along the creek or up into the hills where they could watch the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Eleanor met the ranch hands from the Double R, and they took to her immediately, charmed by her directness and her refusal to play the delicate flower. She could talk cattle and horses with the best of them, having absorbed knowledge from her customers and from her own observations. When one of the hands mentioned that his saddle was falling apart, Eleanor offered to repair it for a fair price, and soon she had a steady side business fixing tack for half the ranches in the county. Cole introduced Eleanor to his best friend James, who served as foreman at the Double R. James was a tall, quiet man with dark skin and eyes that missed nothing. He had been born into slavery in Louisiana, had escaped to Texas during the war, and had worked his way up from a stable hand to Cole's most trusted employee and friend. He studied Eleanor carefully during their first meeting, and Cole held his breath, knowing that James's opinion mattered more to him than almost anyone else's. She is good for you, James said later, when he and Cole were working on repairing a section of fence. I have not seen you this happy since before your parents died. She has fire in her, that one. She will not let life beat her down. She has been beaten down plenty, Cole said, hammering a nail into place. But she keeps getting back up. That is what I love about her. She does not stay down. That is a rare quality, James said thoughtfully. Most people, they get knocked down once or twice and they decide that is just their lot in life, that they are meant to stay on the ground. But people like Eleanor, people like you decide that being on the ground is just temporary. Just a place to rest before you get up and fight again. You two are well matched. As fall turned to winter, Eleanor's businesses continued to grow. The cafe was so successful that she had to hire a local girl named Mary to help with serving and cleaning. Her dressmaking expanded to include men's shirts and children's clothing. Her leather repair service became so popular that she was considering hiring someone to help with that as well. Every dollar she earned, she saved carefully, keeping meticulous records in a ledger that she hid under a loose floorboard in her room. Cole knew she was saving for something, but he did not pry. He respected her need for financial independence, understood that it was not about trusting him, but about trusting herself, about knowing that she could survive no matter what happened. He had his own plans, his own dreams that he was working toward, and when the time was right, he would share them with her. That time came on a cold December evening, 2 days before Christmas. Cole asked Eleanor to close the cafe early and come with him for a ride. She bundled up in a coat she had sewn herself, warm wool lined with flannel, and climbed into the buggy beside him. They drove in comfortable silence, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the creak of the buggy wheels. Cole stopped on a ridge that overlooked both the town of Redemption and his ranch in the distance. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, and the land below them seemed to glow in the fading light. He helped Eleanor down from the buggy and led her to the edge of the ridge, where they stood side by side, looking out at the vista before them. "Do you see that land there?" Cole said, pointing to a section between the town and the ranch. "That 20 acres belongs to me. I bought it 3 years ago thinking I might expand the ranch someday. But I have a different idea now." Eleanor looked at him questioningly, and Cole took both her hands in his. "I want to build us a house there, Eleanor. Not a ranch house, not a place that is solely mine that you would be moving into, but a home that we design together, that we build together. It would be close enough to town that you could easily get to the cafe, but far enough out that we would have privacy, space for gardens, and maybe some animals of our own. I want to marry you, Eleanor Hayes, and I want us to start our life together in a place that belongs to both of us equally." Eleanor was crying again, but Cole was learning that her tears were not signs of weakness, but of deep feeling, emotions so strong they had to find expression somehow. "Cole Brennan, are you proposing to me?" "I am," Cole said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. He opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. Not ostentatious, but genuine, solid, enduring. "I know it is not much, but it is honest, and it is yours if you will have it. Marry me, Eleanor, build a life with me. Let us create something together that is bigger and better than anything we could make alone." "Yes," Eleanor said, not hesitating for even a moment. "Yes, Cole, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I will create something beautiful with you." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in stars that seemed to shine just for them, bearing witness to their promise. They were married in late January of 1877 in a small ceremony at the church in Redemption. Mrs. Patterson stood as Eleanor's matron of honor, and James served as Cole's best man. The entire town turned out for the celebration, filling the church to capacity and spilling out onto the steps. Eleanor wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Cole thought she had never looked more beautiful. The reception was held at Eleanor's cafe, which she had decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. She had prepared the food herself, with help from several of the women in town, and the tables groaned under the weight of roasted chicken and ham, fresh bread and butter, vegetables and potatoes, and pies in more varieties than Cole could count. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts, and through it all, Cole kept his eyes on his bride, marveling that this incredible woman had chosen him, had agreed to build a future with him. As the party wound down and guests began to drift home, James pulled Cole aside. "You are a lucky man," he said simply. "Treat her right, and you will have a partner for life. Treat her wrong, and you will lose the best thing that ever happened to you." "I know," Cole said seriously. "I will not take her for granted, James. I swear it." "I believe you, Trino," James said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now go. Your wife is waiting." Eleanor and Cole spent their wedding night in a room at the boarding house since their house was still under construction. They had been careful to maintain propriety during their courtship, but now finally they could express the full depth of their love for each other. Cole was gentle and patient, and Eleanor was eager and unafraid, and together they discovered a passion that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Eleanor traced patterns on Cole's chest with her fingertips. "I never thought I would feel this way again," she admitted quietly. "After my first husband died, after his family took everything, I thought I would never trust anyone enough to let them into my heart. But you changed that, Cole. You showed me that love does not have to be about possession or control. It can be about partnership and respect and building something together." Cole kissed her forehead, tightening his arms around her. "You changed me, too. Before you came to Redemption, I was just going through the motions, running the ranch because it was what I knew, but without any real joy in it. You reminded me what it feels like to be excited about the future, to have dreams that go beyond just surviving. You make me want to be better, to do more, to create something that matters." Over the following months, They threw themselves into building their home and their life together. Cole designed the house with Eleanor's input, making sure it had a spacious kitchen where she could experiment with new recipes, a sitting room with large windows to let in the light, and a bedroom that faced east so they could wake to the sunrise. Eleanor insisted on a large pantry and a separate workroom where she could continue her sewing and leather work. The construction took longer than expected, as building projects always do, but Eleanor and Cole found they enjoyed the process almost as much as they anticipated enjoying the finished product. They would ride out to the property after Eleanor closed the cafe, bringing a picnic dinner, and they would sit on the half-finished porch talking about their plans and dreams while watching the sun set over the land that was now theirs. During this time, Eleanor's businesses continued to flourish. The cafe was so popular that she had to expand the dining area again, taking over even more of the general store's space. Mrs. Patterson did not mind, as the increased foot traffic had tripled her own sales. Eleanor hired 2 more girls to help with cooking and serving, training them carefully in her methods and standards. But Eleanor was not content to simply maintain what she had built. She saw new opportunities everywhere she looked. She noticed that many of the ranch wives struggled to preserve food for the winter, so she started offering canning services and classes. She noticed that cowboys often needed clothes mended while they were on the trail, so she created portable sewing kits that she sold at the general store. She noticed that leather goods were expensive to replace but cheap to maintain, so she published a small pamphlet on basic leather care that she gave away free with every repair job, building loyalty and repeat business. Cole watched her with pride and admiration, but also with a growing sense of inadequacy. Eleanor was building an empire, creating something significant and lasting, while he felt like he was merely maintaining the ranch, keeping it running without really expanding or innovating. He mentioned this to James one evening as they were checking on the cattle. "That is nonsense," James said bluntly. "You have turned the Double R from a struggling operation into one of the most successful ranches in the county. You have improved the herd quality, expanded the grazing land, and built a reputation for honest dealing that has clients coming from 3 counties over. Just because you are not opening new businesses every week does not mean you are not building something valuable." "But Eleanor started with nothing," Cole protested. "She had literally nothing. And look at what she has created. I started with land and cattle and buildings, everything my parents left me. What have I really accomplished compared to her?" James stopped walking and turned to face Cole directly. "You are comparing apples to oranges, my friend. Eleanor is building businesses in town. You are building a ranch out here. They are different things, requiring different skills and different approaches, but they are both valuable, both important. And you know what? Eleanor does not seem to think you are lacking. She chose you, Cole. She married you. She is building a life with you. That should tell you everything you need to know about your worth." Cole absorbed this, letting the truth of it sink in. James was right, as he usually was. Eleanor had never given any indication that she thought less of him for his different path. In fact, she often spoke with pride about the ranch, about the way Cole treated his employees fairly, about the quality of his cattle, about his reputation for integrity. That night, when Cole returned to the boarding house where he and Eleanor were still staying while their house was being finished, he found her at the small desk in their room working on her accounts by candlelight. She looked up when he entered, her face brightening with a smile that made his heart skip. "How was the ranch?" she asked, setting down her pencil. "Good," Cole said, crossing the room to kiss her. "But I missed you. I always miss you when we are apart." "I miss you too," Eleanor said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I was just thinking about how much easier this will be once we are in our own house, with space to spread out and work. I love Mrs. Caldwell, but this room is getting cramped with all my papers and materials." "Soon," Cole promised. "Another month, maybe 2, and we will be in our home." "Our home, Eleanor. I still cannot quite believe it sometimes." "Believe it?" Eleanor said, kissing him soundly. "We are building something real, Cole, something that will last." The house was finished in early May, just as the wildflowers were blooming across the Texas landscape. turning the fields into a carpet of blue and yellow and red. Cole and Eleanor moved in on a Saturday with help from James and several of the ranch hands. Eleanor had furnished the house simply but comfortably, using pieces she had collected over the months, mixing new purchases with refinished antiques and things she had made herself. When the last box was unpacked and their helpers had departed, Cole swept Eleanor into his arms and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing like children. He set her down in the center of their sitting room, and they stood together, slowly turning to take in every detail of the space they had created. "It is perfect," Eleanor whispered. "Cole, it is absolutely perfect." "It is ours," Cole said, pulling her close. "That is what makes it perfect." They christened every room that night, making love in the bedroom they had designed together, cooking their first meal in Eleanor's dream kitchen, sitting on the porch they had planned so carefully, watching the stars come out over land that belonged to them. It was a night of pure joy, of gratitude for what they had built, and excitement for what was still to come. As their first year of marriage progressed, Cole and Eleanor fell into a rhythm that worked for both of them. Eleanor would rise early to go into town and open the cafe, serving breakfast and lunch before returning home in the mid-afternoon. Cole would work the ranch during the day, often coming into town for lunch at the cafe, and they would spend their evenings together at the house, talking about their days, making plans, and simply enjoying each other's company. Eleanor discovered she was pregnant in late summer, and the news filled them both with joy tinged with terror. They had not specifically planned for a child so soon, but they were both 29 years old now, and they knew that if they wanted children, waiting too long was a risk. Still, Eleanor worried about how she would manage the cafe and her other businesses while pregnant and then caring for an infant. "We will figure it out," Cole assured her, his hand resting gently on her still flat belly. "You do not have to do everything yourself, Eleanor. You have employees you trust. You can delegate more, train them to handle things without your constant supervision. And I will help however I can. We are partners, remember? We build things together." Eleanor knew he was right, but letting go of control was hard for someone who had spent so long having to do everything herself just to survive. Still, she recognized that she would have no choice, so she began systematically training Mary and her other employees to take on more responsibility. She wrote down all her recipes and procedures, creating detailed guides that anyone could follow. She taught her staff how to handle the books, how to order supplies, how to deal with difficult customers, everything they would need to know to run the cafe without her. Cole watched this process with admiration, seeing again the same organizational genius and strategic thinking that had allowed Eleanor to build so much from so little. She was not just creating businesses, she was creating systems, frameworks that could function independently of her constant presence. She was building something that would last. Their son was born in March of 1878, a squalling, red-faced, perfect little creature they named Thomas after Cole's father. Eleanor's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Cole feared he would lose her, when the doctor's face grew grave, and the women assisting sent for the priest just in case. But Eleanor fought through it with the same determination she brought to everything else in her life. And when Cole finally held his son for the first time with Eleanor exhausted but triumphant beside him, he felt a love so profound it brought tears to his eyes. "You did it," he said to Eleanor, kissing her sweat-dampened forehead. "You are the strongest person I have ever known." "We did it," Eleanor corrected, her voice hoarse from hours of screaming. "We made him together, Cole. He is ours." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming, but they navigated them together, splitting the night feedings and diaper changes, taking turns walking the floor with a colicky baby, supporting each other through the fog of sleep deprivation and new parent anxiety. Eleanor's staff stepped up beautifully, running the cafe so smoothly that it barely needed her intervention. She would go into town once or twice a week to check on things and handle the books, but otherwise she focused on recovering from childbirth and caring for Thomas. Cole found himself falling even more deeply in love with his wife as he watched her with their son. She was patient and nurturing, but also practical, and unafraid, handling the less pleasant aspects of baby care with the same no-nonsense efficiency she brought to everything else. She sang to Thomas while she nursed him, old Tennessee ballads from her childhood, and the sound of her voice filled their home with warmth and peace. As Thomas grew from a tiny infant to a chubby, laughing baby, Eleanor began to reclaim more of her time and energy. She returned to the cafe more regularly, bringing Thomas with her, and setting up a cradle in the back room where he could sleep while she worked. The customers loved seeing the baby, and Eleanor discovered that motherhood had somehow made her even more popular, more relatable to the women who came to the cafe. By the time Thomas was a year old, Eleanor was ready to expand again. She proposed to Mrs. Patterson that they open a second location on the other side of town, closer to the warehouses and the freight depot, catering to the teamsters and railroad workers who rarely made it to the original cafe. Mrs. Patterson was hesitant, worried about overextending, but Eleanor's projections were convincing, and eventually she agreed. The second cafe opened in summer of 1879 and was profitable within the first month. Eleanor trained a woman named Sarah, a widow with 3 children to support, to run the new location, giving her a stake in the profits and treating her as a partner rather than just an employee. Sarah worked as hard as Eleanor herself, and the Teamsters Cafe, as it came to be known, quickly developed a loyal following. Cole watched all of this with awe and pride, but also with a growing sense that he needed to do more to build something equally significant. The ranch was successful, yes, but it was not growing, not innovating. He talked to James about ways to expand, and together they developed a plan to start breeding horses in addition to cattle. There was good money in horses, especially trained horses that could be sold to the army and to wealthy ranchers, and Cole had always had a gift for working with the animals. They started small, buying a few quality mares and a promising stallion, building new stables and corrals, hiring a breaker who specialized in training cavalry mounts. It was a risk, a significant investment of money and time, but Cole believed in the plan, and Eleanor supported him completely, even offering to invest some of her own savings in the venture. "We are partners," she said, when Cole protested that she did not need to risk her hard-earned money on his dreams. "Your success is my success, just as my success is yours. We build together, remember? That is what we promised each other." The horse breeding operation took time to establish, but within 2 years it was showing real promise. The Army sent a buyer who was impressed with the quality of Cole's animals, and he left with a contract for 20 horses a year at good prices. Word spread, and soon Cole was getting inquiries from ranchers all over Texas and even from as far away as Kansas and Oklahoma. As their businesses grew and their son thrived, Cole and Eleanor found themselves becoming pillars of the redemption community. They were still young, only in their early 30s, but they were respected for their work ethic, their integrity, and their willingness to help their neighbors. Eleanor gave jobs to women who needed them, training them in skills that would allow them to support themselves. Cole hired men who were down on their luck, giving them a chance to prove themselves on the ranch. Together, they contributed to the church and the school, helped organize town celebrations, and served as examples of what hard work and partnership could achieve. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic little boy who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both his parents. He had Cole's steady temperament and Eleanor's sharp mind, and he was equally comfortable helping his mother in the cafe or riding with his father on the ranch. By the time he was 4 years old, he was already showing signs of the same determination and work ethic that had made his parents successful. Eleanor became pregnant again in late 1881, and this time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter Emily was born in the summer of 1882, a tiny, perfect little girl with Eleanor's gray eyes and Cole's dark hair. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help care for her, and Eleanor and Cole marveled at the family they had created and the life they had built together. But even as they celebrated their growing family, Eleanor was thinking about the future, about what would happen to her businesses when she was gone, about how to create something that would outlast her. She had seen too many women's hard work disappear when they died. Their businesses sold off or dissolved because they had no legal standing, no way to pass on what they had created to their daughters or other women who might continue their work. She discussed this with Cole one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. "I want to set up a trust," she said. "Something that will protect the cafes and the other businesses, ensure that they continue even if something happens to me. I want Emily to be able to inherit what I have built, not just as a passive recipient, but as an active participant. I want her to have the same opportunities I fought for, without having to fight as hard." Cole listened carefully, as he always did when Eleanor shared her thoughts. "That is a good idea," he said, "and smart. We should talk to a lawyer, see what options are available. I would like to do something similar with the ranch, set up a structure that will protect it for Thomas and Emily both, regardless of which one is more interested in running it. I do not want them to be bound by tradition or expectations. I want them to have choices." They traveled to Fort Worth to consult with a lawyer, a progressive man who was interested in the legal questions surrounding women's property rights and business ownership. He helped them set up trusts and partnership agreements that protected Eleanor's businesses and gave her children equal inheritance rights, regardless of gender. It was complicated and expensive, but both Cole and Eleanor felt it was worth every penny to ensure that what they had built would endure. As the years passed, redemption continued to grow, and Cole and Eleanor grew with it. Eleanor opened a third cafe, this one in a neighboring town, and she began to think about franchising her model, allowing other women to open cafes using her recipes and systems in exchange for a share of the profits. Cole's horse breeding operation expanded to include training programs for ranch hands and cowboys, teaching them skills that would make them more valuable employees. Together they purchased additional land, not to expand their own holdings, but to subdivide and sell to new settlers at fair prices, helping to build up the community. Thomas and Emily grew into confident, capable young people who understood the value of hard work and the importance of treating others with respect. Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching, spending every spare moment with his father and James, learning about cattle and horses and land management. Emily inherited her mother's head for business, sitting in on meetings at the cafe from the time she was 8 years old, asking questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of profit and loss, supply and demand, customer service, and employee management. In 1890, when Thomas was 12 and Emily was 8, Eleanor decided it was time to step back from the day-to-day operations of her businesses. She was 41 years old, and while she was still energetic and sharp, she wanted to spend more time with her family, more time enjoying the life she had built rather than constantly striving to build more. She promoted Sarah to managing partner of the entire cafe operation, giving her significant ownership stake and authority to make decisions without constant oversight. "You have earned this," Eleanor told Sarah when they signed the new partnership agreement. "You have worked harder than anyone I know, and you understand the business as well as I do. I trust you to carry it forward, to keep building and growing, and I hope you will do for other women what I tried to do for you. Give them opportunities, teach them skills, help them build something for themselves." Sarah, who had gone from struggling widow to successful businesswoman under Eleanor's mentorship, had tears in her eyes as she shook Eleanor's hand. "I will never forget what you did for me," she said. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. You taught me that I could be more than just a poor woman trying to survive. You showed me that I could create something, build something, be something. I will honor that by doing the same for others." With more free time, Eleanor threw herself into community projects. She helped organize a school board and fought for better educational opportunities for all children in Redemption, regardless of their family's economic status. She started a lending library, collecting books from donations and purchasing others, making literature available to people who could never afford to buy books themselves. She advocated for better roads and more reliable mail service, writing letters to state officials and organizing petition campaigns. Cole was equally involved in community development. He served on the town council, helped establish a volunteer fire brigade, and worked with other ranchers to improve breeding stock and disease prevention across the entire county. He was respected as a fair and honest man, someone whose word was his bond, and his reputation only grew as the years passed. In 1895, when Eleanor was 46 and Cole was 47, they received an honor that moved them both deeply. The town of Redemption decided to rename the main street Eleanor Avenue in recognition of her contributions to the community. At the dedication ceremony, the mayor gave a speech describing how Eleanor had arrived in town with nothing, how she had built businesses that employed dozens of people and provided essential services, how she had become a model of what determination and hard work could achieve. Eleanor stood beside Cole, holding his hand tightly as the mayor spoke. When it was her turn to respond, she kept her remarks brief but heartfelt. "I did not build anything alone," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the assembled crowd. "Everything I achieved was only possible because this community gave me a chance, because Mrs. Patterson took a risk on a stranger, because Cole believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself. I am honored beyond words by this recognition, but I want everyone here to understand that this is not just my story. This is the story of what we can all accomplish when we support each other, when we give people opportunities instead of judgment, when we build together instead of tearing each other down. Thank you, Redemption. Thank you for being a place where someone like me could find not just survival, but a home." The crowd erupted in applause, and Cole squeezed Eleanor's hand, his eyes shining with pride and love. That evening, as they lay in bed in the house they had designed together nearly 20 years earlier, Eleanor turned to Cole and said, "Do you remember what you said to me back when I first opened the cafe? You said I walked in with nothing and built something, and that it was the finest thing you had seen." "I remember," Cole said, pulling her closer, "and I meant every word. I still mean it, Eleanor, what you built. What you continue to build, it is extraordinary." "What we built," Eleanor corrected gently. "You keep saying I did it, but Cole, I could not have done any of it without you. You believed in me when no one else did. You supported my dreams instead of trying to constrain them. You were a true partner in every sense of the word. We built this together." Cole kissed her, a long, slow kiss that still, after all these years, made Eleanor's heart race. "Together," he agreed, "always together." As the new century approached, Thomas, now 21, took over more responsibility for the ranch. He had grown into a tall, strong young man with his father's integrity and his mother's strategic mind. He introduced new innovations, modernizing the operation while respecting the traditions that had made it successful. He married a local girl named Rebecca, a teacher at the Redemption School, and they started their own family, building a house on ranch land, continuing the legacy of family and hard work. Emily, at 17, was already showing signs of becoming an even more formidable businesswoman than her mother. She had ideas for expanding the cafe operation into neighboring counties, for adding new services like catering and delivery, for franchising the model more aggressively. Eleanor mentored her carefully, teaching her everything she knew, but also encouraging her to find her own path, to innovate and experiment rather than simply following in her mother's footsteps. In 1899, Eleanor and Cole celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary with a party attended by what seemed like half the county. Friends and family filled their home and spilled out into the yard, eating and drinking and dancing to fiddle music. As Cole and Eleanor took a turn around the makeshift dance floor that had been set up in their barn, they reflected on how far they had come from that scorching summer day in 1876, when Eleanor had collapsed on the steps of the general store with nothing but determination and a dream. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked, spinning Eleanor gently. "Do you ever wish you had chosen an easier path, married someone wealthy who could have given you comfort without all the struggle?" Eleanor laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. "Not for a single second, Cole. Everything I have, everything I am, I built with my own hands and my own mind. And I built most of it with you beside me, supporting me, believing in me. I would not trade that for all the inherited wealth in the world. The struggle is what made it meaningful. The building is what made it mine, truly mine. And sharing it with you is what made it joy instead of just survival." Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even after more than 2 decades of marriage, Eleanor could still move him to tears with her words, with her fierce independence, and her equally fierce love. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said. "I watched you walk in with nothing and build something extraordinary, and then, miracle of miracles, you let me be part of it. You let me love you. You built a life with me. That is the finest thing I have ever been part of, Eleanor. The finest thing I have ever seen or known or experienced." They kissed there in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by family and friends, and a cheer went up from the crowd. Thomas and Emily joined them, wrapping their arms around their parents, and for a long moment the four of them stood together, a family united by love and respect and the shared understanding of what it meant to build something lasting. The new century brought new challenges and new opportunities. The railroad expanded, making redemption more accessible and bringing in more settlers and businesses. Automobiles began to appear on the streets, though horses still outnumbered them by a wide margin. Electricity came to town, and Eleanor was one of the first to have it installed in the cafes, marveling at the bright, clean light that replaced the dimmer glow of gas lamps. Cole and Eleanor watched these changes with interest, adapting where necessary, but staying true to the principles that had always guided them: hard work, fair dealing, community support, and partnership. They were grandparents now, with Thomas and Rebecca providing them with 3 grandchildren who brought new energy and joy into their lives. They were also mentors to a new generation of entrepreneurs, both men and women, who came to them for advice on starting businesses or managing land. Eleanor's cafe empire had grown to include 7 locations across 3 counties, all run by women she had trained and partnered with. The original cafe in Redemption was now operated by Mary, who had started as a serving girl at 16 and was now, at 37, a confident businesswoman with a stake in the enterprise. The franchise model Eleanor had developed was being studied by business schools in Dallas and Houston, held up as an example of how to create sustainable, scalable business systems. Cole's horse breeding operation was equally successful, with the Double R brand known throughout Texas and beyond for quality animals and honest dealing. James, now in his 60s, had officially retired from the foreman position, though he still came around regularly to offer advice and check on the horses he loved. Thomas had hired a new foreman, a young man named Carlos who brought fresh ideas while respecting the traditions that had made the ranch successful. In 1905, on Eleanor's 56th birthday, Cole planned a surprise. He had commissioned a painting of Eleanor as she had been when she first arrived in Redemption, dusty, worn, but with fire in her eyes and determination in the set of her jaw. Beside it, he had commissioned a second painting of Eleanor as she was now. Older, yes, but polished and confident, dressed in fine clothes she had made herself, with the main street of Redemption visible behind her, bustling with businesses and people. When Eleanor saw the paintings hung side by side in their sitting room, she wept. "Cole, this is too much. They are beautiful, but I do not deserve such a tribute." "You deserve every tribute I could possibly give you," Cole said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "These paintings tell your story, Eleanor. They show where you started and what you built. They show the journey, the transformation, the triumph. I want our grandchildren and great-grandchildren to see these and understand what you accomplished, what you overcame, what you created from nothing." Eleanor turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes still as gray and clear as they had been 3 decades earlier. "We created," she said firmly. "We built it together, Cole. Never forget that." "I never could," Cole said, kissing her forehead. "You are the finest thing I have ever seen, Eleanor Brennan. The finest thing I have ever known." As they grew older, Cole and Eleanor gradually reduced their active involvement in their businesses, turning over more responsibility to Thomas and Emily and the various partners they had trained over the years. They spent more time traveling, visiting places they had only read about, seeing the ocean for the first time, marveling at the mountains and cities and diverse landscapes that made up the vast country they called home. But they always returned to Redemption, to the house they had built, to the community they had helped shape, to the land that had given them a chance to create something lasting. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands as they watched the sunset, talking about their memories and their gratitude, about the children and grandchildren who carried forward their legacy. Cole died peacefully in his sleep in 1918, at the age of 70. Eleanor woke to find him beside her, his face serene, his hand still clasping hers even in death. She mourned him deeply, the partner who had believed in her when she had nothing, who had supported her dreams, who had loved her not despite her strength but because of it. The town shut down for his funeral, and hundreds of people came to pay their respects to a man who had been not just a successful rancher but a pillar of integrity and kindness. Eleanor lived another 7 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the end. She saw Emily take over the cafe empire and expand it even further, using new technologies and marketing strategies that Eleanor could barely comprehend but fully supported. She saw Thomas's children grow into capable young adults who would carry forward the ranch's legacy. She saw Redemption transform from the small frontier town she had stumbled into in 1876 to a thriving city with paved streets and electric lights and all the conveniences of modern life. But what gave Eleanor the most satisfaction was not the size of her businesses or the value of her properties or the recognition she had received. It was the knowledge that she had proved something essential, that a person who starts with nothing, who has everything taken from them, can still build something meaningful if they refuse to give up, if they see opportunities instead of obstacles, if they work hard and treat people fairly and never stop believing in their own capacity to create. On a warm spring evening in 1925, Eleanor sat on her porch, now aged 76, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Emily had organized the gathering, bringing everyone together to celebrate Eleanor's birthday and to hear her stories one more time. As the sun set over the land that had been wilderness when Eleanor first arrived, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and orange and purple, Emily asked the question she had asked many times before but never tired of hearing answered. "Mama, tell us again how you and Papa met. Tell us about the day you came to Redemption." Eleanor smiled, her eyes still that stormy gray even though her hair had long since turned white. "I walked into this town with nothing," she began, her voice still strong and clear. "I had walked 70 miles through the desert, and I had no money, no possessions, nothing but the determination to build something for myself, something no one could take away. Your father was the first person to help me, the first person to see past the dust and desperation to the person I could become. And do you know what he told me years later after I had opened the cafe and started building my businesses?" The children leaned in, even though they had heard this story countless times. "What did he say, Grandma?" asked one of Thomas's daughters. Eleanor's smile widened, and her eyes shone with tears and joy. "He said, you walked in with nothing and built something. That is the finest thing I have seen. And that, my darlings, is the secret to life. It does not matter where you start. It does not matter what has been taken from you or what obstacles you face. What matters is what you build, what you create, what you make with your own hands and your own mind. Your grandfather understood that. He saw it in me, and he helped me see it in myself. And together we built something beautiful. We built a partnership, a family, a legacy. We built a life worth living." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, at the generations she and Cole had created, at the legacy of love and hard work and determination that would continue long after she was gone. "Promise me something," she said, her voice intense despite her age. "Promise me that you will never let anyone convince you that you are less than you are, that you cannot build something meaningful, that your dreams are too big or too bold. You come from people who started with nothing and built empires. You come from people who refused to give up, who saw challenges as opportunities, who believed that hard work and integrity were worth more than inherited wealth. Carry that forward. Build something. Create something. Make the world better than you found it." "We promise, Grandma," they chorused, and Eleanor felt a peace settle over her, a sense of completion and satisfaction. She had done what she set out to do all those years ago when she had walked into Redemption, with nothing but determination and hope. She had built something. She had created a legacy. She had proved that it was possible to start with nothing and end with everything that mattered. Eleanor passed away peacefully a few weeks later on a morning when the wildflowers were blooming across the Texas landscape, turning the fields into a carpet of color. They buried her beside Cole on a hill overlooking the house they had built together, the land they had cultivated, the town they had helped shape. The funeral drew people from across the state. Business leaders and ranch hands, wealthy society women and struggling single mothers, all united in their respect for a woman who had shown them what was possible when you refused to give up, when you built instead of merely surviving, when you created opportunities for others even as you built opportunities for yourself. Emily stood at her mother's grave, her own children beside her, and she thought about everything Eleanor had taught her, everything she had modeled through her life and her choices. She thought about the scared, desperate woman who had collapsed on the steps of the general store in 1876, and she thought about the confident, successful, beloved woman who had just been laid to rest. The transformation was almost miraculous, except it was not a miracle at all. It was the result of hard work, determination, intelligence, and the willingness to see opportunities where others saw only problems. And it was the result of partnership, of the love between Eleanor and Cole, a love built on respect and support, and the shared belief that they could build something together that neither could build alone. That was Eleanor's true legacy, Emily realized. Not just the businesses or the property or the money, but the model of what partnership could be, what marriage could be when two people came together not to limit each other, but to expand each other's possibilities. As the years passed and redemption continued to grow and change, Eleanor's story became legend. School children learned about the woman who had walked into town with nothing and built an empire. Young entrepreneurs studied her business models and strategies. Women facing their own struggles drew inspiration from her example, from the proof that it was possible to overcome almost any obstacle if you refused to give up. The cafes continued to operate under the management of the women Eleanor had trained, employing hundreds of people over the decades, providing quality food and good wages and opportunities for advancement. The ranch thrived under Thomas's management and then under his children's management, continuing the traditions of fair dealing and quality stock that Cole had established. The house that Cole and Eleanor had built together remained in the family, expanded and modernized, but still fundamentally the same structure they had designed with such care and love. And in the sitting room of that house, the two paintings Cole had commissioned still hung side by side. Eleanor as she had been when she arrived, raw and desperate, but determined, and Eleanor as she had become, polished and successful, but still fundamentally the same person, still driven by the need to build something meaningful, to create something lasting, to prove that a person who starts with nothing can end with everything that truly matters. The paintings became a touchstone for each new generation, a reminder of where the family had come from and what they were capable of achieving. Parents would bring their children to stand before the paintings and tell them the story of how Eleanor had walked 70 miles through the desert, how Cole had been the first to help her, how she had built businesses from nothing, how their love had created a partnership that had transformed not just their own lives, but the entire community. And the most important part of the story, the part that was emphasized again and again, was not the wealth or the success or the recognition, but the way they had built it together, supporting each other's dreams, believing in each other's capacities, creating something bigger than either could have created alone. That was the real legacy of Eleanor and Cole Brennan, the proof that love and partnership, when built on respect and equality and shared purpose, could create something truly extraordinary, something that would last not just for a lifetime but for generations. The words Cole had spoken so many years ago, on that evening when Eleanor had opened her first cafe, became the family motto, engraved on a plaque that hung beside the paintings. You walked in with nothing and built something. That is the finest thing I have seen. It was a reminder that everyone starts somewhere, That obstacles and setbacks are not endings but challenges to overcome, that the finest things in life are not inherited but created, not given but earned, not individual accomplishments, but partnerships that amplify the strengths of both people involved. And so Eleanor's legacy lived on, not just in the businesses and properties that bore her name, but in the countless lives she had touched, the countless people she had inspired, the countless individuals who looked at her story and thought, if she could do it, starting with nothing, then maybe I can too. That was the finest thing of all, not what Eleanor had built for herself, but what she had shown others they could build for themselves. That was the gift she had given to the world, the legacy that would truly never die. She had walked in with nothing and built something extraordinary, and in doing so, she had shown generations of people that they could do the same. And that, more than any business empire or real estate holdings or accumulation of wealth, was the finest thing anyone could ever see or hope to achieve.